Always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Now, there's a public inquiry set to take place following the many failings around the killer, Valdo Calacane. I've got to ask you a question because it seems so frequent now that we have these horrendous incidents where the cause is, you guessed it, mental health. So I'm asking you, do you think this care in the community strategy is working, or is it time to reevaluate and ask questions about whether or not we need to move back to the days of institutionalisation? Your thoughts on that? Also, I've got a confession to make. I'm not really bothered who is the next leader of the Tory party. It turns out, though, I'm not alone because a poll out today says that 62% of Brits feel the same way as me. Are you one of them? If so, tell me why. And if indeed you do care, tell me, who do you think then it should be? And a simple question for you, do you think Brits should be prioritised for social housing? All of that and more, but first, the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much indeed, and good evening to you. Just after 6 o'clock, the top story tonight, the Prime Minister said to be considering a judge-led public inquiry into the Nottingham stabbings last June. It comes after the Health Secretary today acknowledged the NHS made multiple and fundamental failures in the care given to Valdo Calacane, who killed Grace O'Malley-Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates last year. The trust involved, though, insists it has improved, but Wes Streeting says their deaths could and should have been prevented.
What the Care Quality Commission have uncovered is deeply distressing, most of all for the families of Grace, Barnaby and Ian, who, in addition to having to deal with the unbearable and unimaginable grief they're going through, are doing so in the knowledge that this could have been prevented and should have been prevented, that there wasn't a single point of failure, but multiple and fundamental failures on the part of the NHS to manage Valdo Calacane's treatment in a way that not only kept him safe, but most importantly kept others safe.
In other news today, a 32-year-old man has appeared in court accused of stabbing an 11-year-old tourist in London's Leicester Square. Ioan Pinatru's been charged with attempted murder and possessing a bladed article. Prosecutors claim members of the public intervened when the girl was attacked just before lunchtime yesterday. And it was thought the girl's mother had also been hurt. However, it's been confirmed now that the blood from her daughter's injuries had been mistaken for injuries of her own. A 13-year-old girl whose prosecutors has... Let's start that one again. A 13-year-old girl who prosecutors allege punched and kicked the door of a hotel housing asylum seekers has pleaded guilty to threatening unlawful violence. The teenager, who can't be named due to her age, is one of several convicted today after recent riots, and she'll be sentenced at Basingstoke Magistrates Court on the 30th of September. Police have launched an urgent appeal to find a missing 12-year-old girl from Sittingbourne in Kent. Katie Spice was last seen 15 miles away at Canterbury East train station around 5 o'clock on Sunday evening. You can see here on TV the latest CCTV images showing Katie wearing black leggings and a pink top. Police now urging anyone who may have seen her or knows where she is to call 999. Conservative leadership hopeful Tom Tugendhat has accused the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, of a failure of leadership over the disorder over the last 2 weeks. The former Security Minister said the disorder seen on the UK's streets was completely unacceptable, and he condemned racist thugs as he opened a speech in central London.
This has been the government's first real test, and the Prime Minister fell short. When we needed a strong government, we got a party in the mindset of opposition. We needed a leader. We got a lawyer waiting for the case to reach court. You have to be determined and aware throughout. You have to be ready to do the job from day one.
In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the Russian leader that the war is coming home in his most direct challenge to Vladimir Putin since the conflict began. It comes a week after a surprise counterattack on the Kursk region of Russia. Ukraine's military says it does now control a 1,000 square kilometre border area. Meanwhile, all of Ukraine is currently under an air raid alert amid recent Russian drone attacks and this morning 2 ballistic missile strikes. Here, an inquest into the death of former England cricketer Graham Thorpe has opened today after his wife revealed the sportsman tragically took his own life. The inquest heard Mr Thorpe died after being struck by a train at a railway station in Surrey. Tributes have now flooded in for the late cricketer after his death on the 5th of August. His family have since revealed he'd been suffering from depression and anxiety. And if you or anyone you may know is suffering with mental health, you can, of course, get help and support from Samaritans via their website, samaritans.org, or call 116 123. And in sport, England cricket captain Ben Stokes has been sidelined for the rest of the summer after a scan has revealed he's suffered a torn hamstring. The 33-year-old had to be helped off the field in Sunday's match against Northern Superchargers. Ollie Pope will now lead the team in his place for the 3-match series against Sri Lanka, which starts next week. Stokes, though, is still aiming to be fit in time for October's tour of Pakistan. And finally, a 9th animal-themed Banksy artwork has appeared overnight, this time at London Zoo. The latest piece has been sprayed onto the entrance and shows a gorilla appearing to lift up the barrier and let the animals escape. Staff at the zoo, though, have been asked if the elusive artist was spotted on TV. But, of course, they're not giving anything away. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for your next update at 7 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. I like that latest Banksy. Did you see the previous one where he did, I can't remember which animal it was, on a satellite dish, and within a nanosecond someone had come along and nicked it and the street sign? Always gets me thinking, what on earth do you do with those things? So when you've stolen this massive satellite dish that's apparently worth a fortune, to whom do you approach to try and sell this thing? The mind boggles, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm with you till 7 alongside me, the former Conservative MP and Chairman Sir Dewberry and the journalist and commentator Judita De Silva. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome, as are each and every one of you at home tonight. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, which is gbnews.com/yoursay, where you talk to me and each other, or, of course, you can tweet or X me. But look, did any of you see that programme last night that was on about that horrendous attack in Nottingham? I remember covering it on this story, actually, on this show. It stopped us all in our tracks. Of course, I'm speaking of that multiple, the stabbing at Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Kurtz. Now, I've got to say, there was a documentary out last night that looked at it from the perspective of the killer's family, the killer obviously being Valdo Callaghan. The amount of failings, I can't even tell you, so many different failings. Every single step, actually. I'd love to say it was just one person or one service that failed. It seemed to be multiple failings. And the result was, as we were just explaining there, multiple people very sadly lost their lives. I mean, where to even begin with this? So the BBC was actually even criticised for showing this documentary from the perspectives of the killer's family. There's a lot of criticism there. Do you think on that first point they were right to do that?
Well, I think, Michelle, it was an interesting programme. I watched part of it myself, and I think it is quite important that we hear all sides of this story, because what we're going to hear now, and we've heard it today from the government, is a call to have another public inquiry looking at the failings. We've had far too many of them. I think we know what is going wrong, and it's time, actually, that we concentrated on solutions rather than having another period where we ask all the same questions over and over again.
Well, let's look at Wes Streeting then, because he's obviously come out. I don't know what this is on the screen. Can you see that? Is that my eyes going funny? Or are we showing some bizarre stripes? Well, if you are seeing stripes, it's not just my eyeballs. We will fix that. Apologies. But let's just look at Wes Streeting and see what he had to say on the matter.
What the Care Quality Commission have uncovered is deeply distressing. most of all for the families of Grace, Barnaby and Ian, who, in addition to having to deal with the unbearable and unimaginable grief they're going through, are doing so in the knowledge that this could have been prevented and should have been prevented, that there wasn't a single point of failure, but multiple and fundamental failures on the part of the NHS to manage Valdo Calicane's treatment in a way that not only kept him safe, but most importantly kept others safe.
Well, the mum, Emma Webber, she's the mum of Barnaby. She's been quite upset that actually the family, the story, are getting the kind of hearing that they've been getting. And she was also speaking out. She was on GB News earlier on today. Look.
You read the report, if anybody's reading the report or even reading the headlines, you can see that there was gross negligence and catastrophic failures which directly led to this individual not being treated properly, not being sectioned properly even, and being released out into the community. If you're at that level, if you're a senior decision maker in the NHS, in medicine, I would say the same within police forces as well, and you don't do your job properly, then you have to be held to account.
See, there's so much that I want to get into about what she was just saying, but this first point about whether or not this documentary should have gone ahead or not, do you think that that was the right thing to do?
In theory, it is the right thing to do, but I do feel like in tragedies like this, the sentiments of the family of the victims should always take precedence. The theory, the idea, the motivation being that what can always happen is that you have a vacuum of sentiments that people will think, oh, the family must have known, what could they have done, why didn't they help? When you have full disclosure from every party, you can then make an informed judgment as people looking at this, assessing this event happening. Because what you'll see is that when she tried to say, hold him in hospital until I get there, they didn't help the mother. When he was diagnosed, she wasn't informed until months, even years later. So information wasn't even given to his immediate dependents so that they could offer any level of care they could have. But I do admit that there should be sensitivity towards the parents of the victims who might feel this is too triggering to handle in this way at this time.
Yeah,
and maybe too soon.
Well, the programme started, didn't it, with all these lovely family photos of Valdo and, you know, like, oh, here he is, what was it, his first bike or his first football or stuff like that. I was painting this picture of this guy. And I thought, God, if I was the mum of one of those teenagers or a relative of Ian Kurtz that was killed as well, you know, I would be really quite unhappy with this kind of positioning of, oh, this, you know, he was a nice guy, really. And the brother, when he was interviewed, and he was asked a question, do you have any regrets? Valdo actually called the brother after he'd killed the two teenagers and said, you know, he's done a bad thing. And the brother was asked, then, do you have any regrets for not getting in touch perhaps with the police or anything like that? And he just kind of said, well, you know, what could I have done? And obviously then Valdo went on to kill again and hurt 3 other people seriously. These failings, though, because we just heard Wes Rioting talking about it there, we heard Emma, Barnaby's mum, talking about it there. We hear this all the time. Every time something bad happens, it is the same old story. We'll do this inquiry, lessons will be learned, things will change. Lessons are never learned. They might be written down in a document, they never learn. These things happen over and over and over again. They cost the public fortunes, Jake, all of these inquiries. Why are we so bad at actually trying to prevent horrendous things in the first place?
Well, so looking at the NHS and why that is so bad, and the police as well, we heard mentioned by one of the parents there, it's because there isn't a culture in our public services of people taking responsibility. It's refer and forget. So someone in a meeting said, in this case, if we're not very careful, this individual, Valdo Calicane, could end up killing people. And he did, just a matter of months, less than a few years later. Now, what I think we need isn't another public inquiry. I read a lot of the statements by the NHS hospital managers, lessons will be learned, just meaningless management speak. What we need is a culture where someone says, I have this concern, I will take it all the way to the top, and I won't stop pursuing this matter until I know to my satisfaction that it has been dealt with properly. Unfortunately, that culture does not exist within public services.
Why?
So if we can learn one thing from that, is we need to try and instill a way of making sure that happens. Maybe it's naming and shaming people who mentioned it but didn't take any action. Maybe it's, heaven forfend, firing some people who got this wrong, which we never see in the public sector. But something has to change. And another public inquiry happening under the Labour Party, but exactly the same if it happened when I was in government under the Tories, will not change this. We need to see a cultural change, and that needs to be driven from the top.
I've got a question for you, but before I do, Judith, what do you think?
I do agree with that to an extent, because I do, on the point you made before about this showing the story of Valdo and his life story, I think the way it's being handled is a bit insensitive, but the purpose of doing that is anyone watching, when you see how a normal child can so degenerate to what this man became, it's telling everyone to identify red flags, because there is no one-size-fits-all, which is a template for someone with paranoid schizophrenia. So seeing him go from normal to a killer is something people should be aware of, because you never know who could be the innocent child next door who begins to present with certain behaviours that you should alert people to. But I do agree with the point that there has to be collaboration between the medical community and also the police, because there was a point made that when the doctor said that he is going to go on to kill, it alarmed people who reviewed it, because doctors don't speak in such definitive terms like that. They're trained to be cautious. But obviously, he presented with such extreme behaviour, he was confident enough to say that. That should alert that you step in and you section and lock this person down for a long period of time, as opposed to, like you said, defer or refer it to someone else.
See, everything in society has become about being kind and not being offensive and all the rest of it. And we used to have, and people will get offended by this term, and it's not my term, it's how they used to be known. You used to have asylums, essentially, for people that were very mentally unstable. There was this very deliberate move in the 80s to try and move from institutionalisation into getting people into the community. There was lots of effort made to kind of destigmatise all of this stuff, and that's really great for the people that are, suffering with this mental illness and the people that love those people. But for the rest of the community, when we seem to have people with quite severe mental illness wandering around in the community, where, let's face it, the services don't seem to be fit for purpose in terms of monitoring and managing and supporting those people, it leaves people feeling quite unsafe, and it gets me wondering whether or not we need to start having conversations about reintroducing some of those places where people used to be kept safe from themselves and everyone else kept safe from them.
I think the problem was what the asylums became, because it almost became a social dustbin for communities' unwanteds. And that's why the degeneration of that whole institution and that structure fell down. What it has to be used for is similar to what they do in countries in Europe and in America, where it's a clinic for treatment, but extended treatment, and also for psychiatric study, because this is a test case for you to understand how does someone deteriorate to this degree, and how does it present early. When they said that he was in uni when he first said, "I'm hearing voices," then you think of cases like the son of Sam. These are kinds of things that have happened before, and if you identify them early, you can almost intervene to a point where it won't degenerate so far, and that's what these are quote-unquote asylums should be, which is places for case studies and also for treatment.
One of my viewers last night, because I mentioned I was going to talk about this, one of my viewers, a lady called Cynthia, I don't know if you're watching tonight, but if you are, hello, you're welcome. She was explaining, she emailed me, she said that one of her relatives used to work at Hellingley, I think that's how you say it, Hellingley Hospital in East Sussex. She was explaining that she absolutely loved her job. She loved her patients and said that the staff protected them, the patients, because they were scared of the outside world. And she said, and it really stuck with me, she said, it wasn't a case of locking the people away, but it was more locking the world that they didn't understand out. And that really struck me, because sometimes society as it is, it's not for everyone. There's a lot of people that do struggle and all the rest of it, and some of those asylums, you were doing horrendous things, absolutely inhumane things, and it's good and it's right and it's proper that those things do not exist anymore. But I just wonder if we've gone too far, Jake, in terms of everyone now just being in the community.
I think you're absolutely spot on with this. Just because something was done badly several decades ago doesn't mean we can't do it well now, does it? It is absolutely the case that we do not have enough mental health inpatient capacity in this country. About a third of people in prison shouldn't actually be there because they're suffering from mental illness. They're in the wrong place. They should be able to go backwards. I'm not saying they should all be let out. but they should be able to go and get treatment and then be sent back to prison to serve the rest of their sentence. And I can tell you, when I was the Member of Parliament, we often had a situation where people would have a severe mental health issue, and the nearest mental health inpatient bed available to them could be an hour and a half, 2 hours away, so the family could provide no support. There is a massive argument in favour of really upping the number of these. They used to be called asylums, let's call them mental health, inpatient institutions, whatever you want to call them. It will relieve the pressure we have in our prison population. But most importantly of all, Michelle, as you and your viewers quite correctly point out, it will keep people safe. Let's have a look what happened to Callaghan. Despite not taking his medicine, being persistently violent, undertaking 8 separate risk assessments that said he wasn't safe, he was released to the care of his GP because there was nowhere else for him to go. And that is why these 3 people are dead. That is the long and short of it, and that's why we do need to massively increase the amount of mental health capacity for people to remain and be detained in this country.
Yeah, I was looking, and according to some stats I found, in England there are 17,789 mental health beds. It was saying that, for comparison, in the 1950s you had 150,000 psychiatric beds, and apparently the UK is some of the lowest number of psychiatric beds in Europe currently. We've got 31 beds per 100,000 people. The EU average is 73 of those beds per 100,000 inhabitants. And also, I speak to a lot of you guys every day. Many of you are police officers or have been police officers. I feel sorry for the police these days as well, because so often they end up being some kind of social worker getting called out to things that actually they're mental health illness issues. What do you make to it all? Your thoughts? Get in touch all the usual ways. After the break, 62% of people apparently don't care who the next Tory leader is. Do you?
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced a tour to Colombia at the invitation of Vice President Francia Márquez. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are expected to highlight the threat posed to children by the internet. Why they have to go to Colombia to do that, I'm not entirely sure. However, this is literally within a week of saying that Harry saying he can't come to London, he doesn't feel it's safe to bring his wife, Meghan, to London because, he fears for her personal safety. And Colombia, to my reckoning, is one of those countries where the government advise you not to even go. In any case, joining me now is royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Hedder-Mancu to explain what's going on here. Rafe, hello, lovely to see you.
Hello, lovely as always. A bit of comic relief here. Yes, so you're quite right. Literally just days after Prince Harry declared that he couldn't bring his wife to Britain because of the potential risk of an acid attack or knife attack, they've now announced that they're going to go to Colombia, one of the world's 10 most dangerous countries.
Right.
A nation riven with political assassinations, with murder, with kidnappings and gun crime. I mean, the hypocrisy is mind-boggling. And it just comes a few months after they went on another trip to Nigeria, another world leader in murder and political kidnappings. Now, look, no one is saying that they're going to be putting themselves into harm's way. They're going there at the invitation of this radically left-wing government. And, of course, we've had successful royal tours of Colombia in the past. Just last year, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, went to Colombia. 10 years ago, our current King and Queen also had a successful trip to Colombia. But that's rather the point. If members of the royal family are able to go to the world's most dangerous nations, the idea that they can't come to the UK because it's too dangerous is simply absurd.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Jake Berry and Judita De Silva remain alongside me. One of my viewers has just got in touch with me. We were just talking about accountability and all of these failings so often in public services. One of my viewers, Michael, says, Michelle, I want to see these NHS staff responsible for the failings on trial for criminal negligence. We spoke about accountability. Do you think criminal accountability is required in some cases?
Well, I think, if you're one of the parents of these murdered individuals or a relative of them, I think you would think that was a reasonable thing to say. You cannot continue with a culture where there is no repercussions for people who do not, in my view, do their job properly and make sure that these things are dealt with. Whether it's criminal or civil, something has to change. Do
you remember Sharon Shoesmith? Anyone? Do you remember Baby P? When you're bored, remind yourself about that story. She got most upset that she felt that she was a scapegoat. I'll leave you to make your own conclusions on that one. Look, let's talk about the Tory leadership, and a simple question for you all at home. Do you care who the next Tory leader is? Of course, remind ourselves, we've got Tom Tugendhat, we've got Priti Patel, Mel Stride, Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly. They are battling it out. I've got to say, I don't really care who wins the next Tory leadership. And I was thinking, is that bad of me? But get this, a poll came out today saying 62% of people are not bothered either. Are you one of those? Jake Berry, why do you think this is, first and foremost, that no one really cares?
Well, it's always the case, actually, if you look back at the polling from Labour leadership elections. When you're in opposition, government in this country is basically designed to make opposition largely irrelevant, and we've got a very split and small opposition at the moment. When you're in opposition, people aren't interested in anything you do, really, until you get nearer to an election. And also, the other thing is, leadership elections are, by their very nature, an internal discussion within a party about what goods it's going to put, who it's going to put in its shop window to try and win the next election. It's only when you get to that point of dressing your shop window and saying, this is the person we think should or could be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, that people start to become interested in it, including the media, who I don't think are giving this much attention, but that isn't unusual.
It's a par for the course, nothing to see here, no one cares, and that's normal. Do you agree with that?
Not really, because when you look at the state of the Tory party now, it's a question of, even in opposition, they're in such disarray and so fractured, they can't even be a functional opposition. And when you look at the kinds of obstacles that the Labour Party has to face now that they're in leadership, it is fertile ground for a unified party to really exploit and magnify every mistake they make. But you will not be able to capitalise on that if you are so fractured. So right now you have a situation where there is no leadership that has the kind of rhetoric or position or platform that unifies the party.
Did you take a lot of interest in the Labour Party leadership when Keir Starmer was elected?
Yes, I did.
Who were the other candidates who stood against him?
They're relevant to me because...
Well, so you didn't take that much interest? I don't know. I was an MP at the time. It's my job to be interested.
Once I'm invested in someone, I then start scrutinising just them.
But people in the United Kingdom do not take opposition parties' leadership elections. You can see it across the years. No one knew who put up against David Cameron. It was David Davis happened, but most normal people, unless they're a politico like me, would know that. This is just the way things happen. When we get nearer to a general election and people are saying, do I want a Farage government, and whoever the Conservative leader is, let's say a Kemi Badenoch Conservative government, or a Keir Starmer's Labour Party, that is the point that the real focus comes on the other political parties.
But don't you think on the back of the situation the Conservative Party is in, a leader that gains interest is almost like a litmus test for regaining faith in the electorate, which, because, like you say, the Conservatives the Labour Party didn't win the election, the Conservatives lost it because they lost faith and confidence. Should you pick a leader that galvanises interest and support, you're beginning to turn favour towards them. So when they do get the position, you know that going into a next election, you're in a better position because the country already has interest in you.
Yeah, and that's what this process is about. I absolutely agree with you, but that's what this process is about trying to pick that person. You can't, we all might have a guess, but you don't know who it is till you've been through the process.
Aren't you concerned that no one cares right now? Because they should at least have some kind of motivation.
Well, I hear what you say, 62, but I wish 100% of people were interested in it. 62% being completely disinterested is not good. I just make the point, it is normal.
Yeah, but I think you're deluding yourself a little bit.
Well, you always tell me this, Michelle.
I know, I do. I can't, because I just think I can't get my head around how so few Tories seem to understand how bad people who previously voted Tory or lent you your vote in 2019, how bad those people currently feel about the Tory party. And you will dismiss, and you come on my programme and you'll say stuff like, yeah, you know, this should have happened, that should have happened. And people will be screaming at their screen and saying, but you guys didn't do it when you had the chance. And when you say now, oh, yeah, no one cares, and that's just because it's par for the course and how the system is and whatever, I think that you're either not understanding, which I don't think is true, because I think you're a very bright guy, or you're just turning a blind eye to the fact that people have such dislike of the Tories. They lent you their vote, and you just basically scrunched it up, chucked it in their face, and in many cases made their life so much worse when you'd promised to make their life so much better. And they want to see the back of you guys, and they don't care what happens to you. Well, and that's why you're seeing this 62%.
We crossed swords, Michelle, on this last time. So I walked away thinking, I wish I'd said this, so let me have a go and say it.
Go on.
First of all, this is a poll of the public. It's not a poll of Conservative voters. I'm sure if you did a poll of Conservative voters, definitely Conservative members, the interest level would be much, much higher. But at the last general election, the Conservative Party got an absolute battering. We lost 170 seats. That is an absolute disgrace.
A third of Tory voters in this same poll say that even they don't care who takes this job. So it's not just broader public.
But it means that 2/3 do care, and as I said, it would be much higher. That is significantly higher than 2/3 not caring, is it? The numbers match up quite well. But the job of the new Conservative Party leader, and part of this process, is to step back, say we let the public down badly, we lost the trust of the public, how do we change that? Funnily enough, in a similar way as Keir Starmer did after the Labour Party had their worst general election result since the 1930s back in 2019 and turned it round in 5 years to put them in an election-winning position. I don't dismiss it at all. The Conservative Party, if it ever wants to be in power again, has got a lot of lessons to learn. We've got a lot of people to say sorry to, and we've got a lot of people to prove to that we are fit to be the next government. And that is the job of the next leader, whoever he or she may be.
Well, I was looking at Tom Tugendhat, and I think there's a lot of rhetoric coming out about Nigel Farage at the moment. And I think, obviously, people saw what happened with reform. You got 4 million people voted for reform. You've had all those people popped up at their what they thought was their office at the weekend, calling everyone basically who voted for them racist, fascist, you name it, and so on and so forth. Tom Tugendhat, he made some interesting comments about Nigel Farage. Look.
After the attack on those little girls in Southport, Nigel Farage claimed the truth is being withheld from us. Later, he justified amplifying this false information by saying he had believed influencers like Andrew Tate and chose to condemn the breakdown of law and order preceding the riots, but not the riots themselves. Now, I want to be clear, this is not leadership.
See, many people will think that this kind of attack from people like Tom on Farage, it's kind of coming with an agenda because people are desperately trying to smear reform as much as you can to try and make individuals feel grubby if they want to support them or vote for them, and that's how you then will pull people back to the Tories. But I find this strange because surely you'll pull people back to the Tories not by battering competition, but by being the best that the Tories can be.
Correct. If the electoral strategy of the Conservative Party is let's be rude about everyone who voted for reform, it's 1, absolutely idiotic, and 2, bound to fail. So that's not the right strategy. But let's look at what Tom said. So he criticised Nigel Farage for saying the truth, whether the truth is being withheld from the public.
He asked that question, didn't he?
Well, he did. Now, as a Member of Parliament, Nigel Farage could have phoned the Home Secretary, particularly as a leader of a political party, and said, tell me the information about this because I want to know, and the Home Secretary would have told him. In fact, in my time in Parliament, opposition MPs, when something very serious like this happened, often got briefings from the Home Secretary, from the Prime Minister, particularly their leaders always did.
So
I did some of them myself.
I think
I agree with Tom that he was irresponsible to put that question out when, with 1 phone call, he could have satisfied himself of the facts rather than relying on influencers like Andrew Tate. What I don't agree with He's also been criticised for saying that we have two-tier policing in this country. Well, we don't have two-tier policing in this country. We have 20-tier policing in this country. Whether, whichever community you are in, the police seem to deal with you in a different way. And you can look at the recent things that have happened. Take the riots in Leeds, where the police ran away. Only 27 people have been arrested, and only 4 of them are being held on remand. Lost their liberty. You compare that to the riots in Southport, both disgusting and should not have happened, but people are being held in prison and in many cases sent to prison, not for taking part in the riots, but for being there. You have people who came out of their house to have a look what was going on, and which is, in my view, quite normal behaviour, and they're having the book thrown at them. That is evidence of two-tier policing in this country. But to say it's two-tier is wrong, because there's about 20 tiers, because everything is dealt with separately and in different ways, depending on how the police feel.
Have people really been convicted for just coming out of the garden and having a look?
Well, there was, I think, this week, there was someone who was convicted for attending the riots. Now, whether they were just coming out in their garden or they lived there, but they didn't take part in it. They just were there.
I know that in Belfast they were saying that being a casual onlooker or whatever the phrase was enough to get you into trouble with the law, which I just think is pretty damn disgusting, actually. If you can't even stand in your own street and have a look at what is occurring without risk of arrest, I think that is awful police.
It's scary.
It is very scary, but I think that people are trying to rule with fear at the moment, make people afraid of what they say, make people afraid of what they do in order to create people conforming with what it is that they want. Kemi Badenoch as well. She has been quite vocal, and I want to come to you on her in a second. I think I've got a clip of Kemi that I can play for you as well.
Kemi Badenoch. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a first-generation immigrant, can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, which I feel this immigration white paper is a move from the 20th century to a much better future immigration system. In particular, I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and also on international students, both of which I lobbied for on behalf of the Wellcome Sanger Institute and Anglia Ruskin University, which serve my constituency. Could he elaborate on how removing the work visa cap in particular will give business certainty?
Back after the break, we're going to talk about that and look at Kemi Badenoch and some of the... What do you think the Tories need to do? Which direction do they need to move into? I also want to ask you about social housing in this country as well. Should Brits be prioritised for that or not? See you in 2.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Cooler and clearer across northern areas tonight. Damp and cloudy further east, which will mean any viewing of the meteor shower will be a bit limited for more central and eastern areas. That's because this weather front that's been lingering across the west will finally push further eastwards overnight tonight, spreading cloud and rain into central areas of England at first this evening and then into the southeast probably by tomorrow morning. Further north and west, though, it's clearing up quite nicely and the winds will ease as well after a breezy day. So that will allow temperatures to fall away much lower than they have done lately. We could be down as low as 4 or 5 degrees rurally. Some towns and cities dipping into the single figures as well. But pretty murky start across central areas of England and the southeast first thing tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, though, for the far north of Scotland in particular. Eastern areas seeing a great start to the day, but as I said, it could be fairly fresh, but the sun will come up and warm things up quite quickly. Fairly good conditions across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, Western Wales as well, but it's northeast England, central areas and parts of the southeast are likely to see quite a grey start to the day. Risk of rain is more limited. I think some of us will see some patchy drizzle at least through the morning. That could last into the afternoon, particularly across the far southeast, but in general it will turn a little bit brighter as we head into the afternoon across central areas. And across the north, it's going to be a fairly fine day. Plenty of sunny spells and it should stay dry. Lighter winds mean it will feel fairly warm in the sunshine, highs of 22 or 23 degrees. But the next band of wet weather is arriving on Thursday morning, particularly across western areas of Scotland where it will persist, as well as Northern Ireland, northwestern England as well. And that will sink southwards through Thursday quite slowly, lingering across the south and east as we head into Friday. So a bit of a potentially wet day across southern areas on Friday, but looking ahead to the weekend, it looks fine, dry and warm.
The latest GB News travel. Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. In Warwickshire, long queues heading northeast of Coventry up the M69. Everybody has been funneled into the outside lane past the scene of a two-car collision just north of the M6. And on the M25, a couple of problems on the Hertfordshire stretch after a car broke down inside the Holmesdale Tunnel clockwise. There are long queues back to the A1M, not being helped, of course, by the roadworks on that top stretch of the M25. And the Kent stretch really slow clockwise after a police investigation just after the QT Bridge at Dartford. Queues back over the QT Bridge into Essex currently. Speaking of Essex, east of Braintree, the A120 remains shut in Coggeshall and Bradwell for accident investigation work. And buses are in for London North Western trains, Bletchley to Bedford after a train broke down. And Transport for Wales can't run from Telford Central to Shifnal in the West Country after a train broke down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7, former Conservative MP and Chairman Sir Jake Berry and journalist and commentator Judita De Silva alongside me. Simon, one of my viewers, gets in touch and says, Michelle, I'm a previous Tory voter and I will confess I don't care who is the next leader. The last 5 years, they didn't only let down the borrowed red wall seats, but every natural Conservative. He's asking, when are any of the candidates for leadership going to say sorry for the mess that they left behind? That would be a good start, he says. Before the break, I was just playing you a clip from Kemi Badenoch. Basically, I think that was in 2018, where she was basically saying she supported immigration. That's me paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. Obviously, now we see a different tone and position from her. What do you think about Kemi Badenoch and her thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely going to be a tough blow to her designs on leadership, because something as polarising but as fundamental as a party's position on immigration, for you to move so starkly from one position to another, it shows you to be somebody who weathers the change. If you can't be consistent on something like that, what else would you be changeable about? And one thing that the Conservative Party doesn't want, I imagine they don't want, is to have someone that, should we give you power, would you shift your platform? They need someone they can depend on, because that's how you unify behind a leader. And that kind of shift in tone and position is not a good look for someone who's trying to galvanise a fractured party.
Is that fair?
Well, I think the biggest problem the Conservative Party's got is people don't believe what they say. Yeah. They say, well, we think you say one thing to get elected and then you get in power and you do another. I mean, they're right to say that, because, frankly, I stood on a manifesto that said we would reduce immigration. It got completely out of hand in my time in Parliament. In fact, I repeatedly voted against my own government to try and get them to do something about it. They wouldn't listen to me. So I think that's why it's so damn...
Why not?
Why wouldn't they listen? Well, yeah, tell me I was just a lone voice. There was 20 of us trying to do it. But
this is what I don't understand, because in society, people have voted for more controls of immigration. So basically,
every election since
every
2010.
election, referendum, the Brexit referendum, and so on and so forth. But yet, I genuinely don't understand. I'm asking you as a political elite person, why don't people listen? Why?
No, I think politics has lost touch with the British people. I know we're going to come on and talk about a few other stories, but about the social housing thing later, but, you know, that really demonstrates to me that. What I find really interesting is one of Kemi Badenoch's supporters came out, Rachel McLean, she was a colleague like me, lost a seat at the last election. He says, it's shameful that this video would be used to attack Kemi. It's what she said. You can't run away from it. In politics, you have to stand by what you say and what you believe in. Going back to Tom Tugendhat, I think the really interesting thing about Tom, who I am supporting, so just put it out there, is that actually what he has done, rather than what he said, he voted against lockdowns, further lockdowns. He didn't support Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson sought to put up national insurance. He, like me, opposed that, saying the Conservative Party should be a low-tax party. The danger for us in this leadership election is we allow the definition of who is good or bad, right-wing or left-wing, still to be dominated by Brexit, almost a decade after the British public have had their say on it. Just because you were in favour of Brexit, well, just because you're in favour of Brexit doesn't necessarily mean you're right-wing. I think that's the reason that people regard Kemi Badenoch as being a staunch right-winger, is because of her position on Brexit. But if you look at her voting record, I'd say Tom Tugendhat's the only one that I know about who voted against lockdown. He's the only one who campaigned with me to stop taxes going up against our own government. But he's been branded as a centrist candidate. I just don't see it myself. I think he's more right-wing than Kemi Badenoch.
One of the things that he was... what even is right-wing anymore? Everything seems to be right-wing, far right. I mean, we're setting ourselves into such a position that if everything is pretty much right-wing, where do you even go from there? I find it a little bit pathetic.
I like to think it's just right.
Well, a lot of my viewers will say, that they are being called far right by people like Keir Starmer, and they regard themselves as right so far. The things that they're concerned about, they've been right to be concerned about. And we have this conversation every day. Anyway, look, Tom Tugendhat, he's also criticised Keir Starmer for his handling of the riots. Is that fair?
I think he needs to be careful, because when you're criticising the handling and talking about different tiers of policing, the whole job of the police is that you use a show of force that's commensurate to the threat you feel you are under or the community is under. And when they said they collaborated with local leaders dealing with certain areas, they have to understand that if someone is attacking the police, a show of force that is directly responsive to that is valid. If someone is a direct threat to the police, a different kind of force would be applied. When he's saying that Keir Starmer's approach showed a wavering in leadership, what would he have had him do? The whole point is you had to be hardline. You had to show the racist rioters, the violent rioters. And one thing that I also want to point out is that the language being used around the different riots needs to be very precise, because if you want to have an open and honest conversation, have one. When you get on a bus or a coach and travel somewhere to set an asylum hotel on fire and barricade the people in, that's not violent protest, that's attempted murder. So when you actually have a perspective of the degree to which different riots have gone to, the proportionate approach needs to be reflective of that. And Keir Starmer had shown that this is going to have the kind of response that is directly responsory to something that has not happened in history for a long time. Everyone will talk for the rest of time about the race riots of 2024 in Britain. The whole world was talking about it. Countries were saying, don't fly to the UK. The world was reacting. This was unprecedented on a global scale.
Yeah, I do want to say
that's something that had to be reflected.
This notion that all of these far-right people got bussed into all of these places, when you actually look at the convictions and where people have been convicted of being violent in, I remember I was looking at this, I think it was even on day one, and on day one, the convictions, it was something like 82% of the people convicted lived either locally or within a 5-mile radius. So I don't really buy this notion that all of these far-right randoms get picked up by a National Express and deposited at the scene of violence.
But the key is this: Keir Starmer's job in a situation like this is not to be popular or rational, it's to be effective. And what he did was scare people into backing down. So whether you like him or dislike him, the actions taken had an effect that helped to quell the fire and fury with which those riots are unfolding.
For now. He's managed to quell the fire and the fury that people have for now, and I think that is a very important distinction to make, because you can batter people into submission all you like, but you do not suddenly get rid of people's concerns. Far from it. I always say censorship is the midwife of extremism. You don't get rid of those concerns, you push them to the more extreme fringes. Look, let's talk social housing. I've been wanting to talk about this for a few days. Do you think it should be prioritised to Brits or not? Your thoughts?
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
A court on Wednesday ruled that a teenager was wrongly ignored before being forced into end-of-life care. Sudiksha Thirumalesh, who was 19, died last year after being prevented from travelling abroad for treatment after doctors said her condition was incurable. Doctors said Ms. Thirumalesh's objection to their decision was unreasonable and that she should have all life-sustaining treatment ended and be put on a palliative care pathway. Last August, a ruling said that the teenager lacked mental capacity to make her own decisions, but 3 judges in the Court of Appeal overturned that decision last week. Lawyers said the move reaffirms the right of patients to disagree with their doctors. The teenager remained fully conscious while being treated by the University Hospitals Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust. Well, to discuss this tragic case, Sudiksha's father, Thirumalesh, and brother Varshan join me now. Thank you so much for joining me in these desperately sad circumstances. This is very important for other people who may find themselves in a similar position, that they will be able to make decisions about their own care with the support of their families, rather than there's sometimes arrogance of the medical profession who think that they know best. So you must be, I hope, very reassured by this judgment that Sudik Shah has achieved something for other people.
Yes, definitely, because this arrogance transformed into cruelty towards my sister's care and ill treatment of the whole family. They think they are on the top of the hierarchical spectrum, and they treated us like we were on the bottom of the lower end of the chains, or rather as low class, but we ensured that our class remained.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Jake Berry and Judita De Silva keeping you company. In the break, we were just continuing that conversation about the rioting, what Judita was calling the race riots there. You had some interesting points, Jake.
Well, look, it's one of those subjects. We did keep going, didn't we?
Yeah,
but the truth is, it feels to me like Keir Starmer has picked a side. And, you know, you can look at the behaviour of Jess Phillips. She's a Home Office minister. Her job is to uphold the law. There were violent protests in Birmingham that she then sought to excuse on Twitter. People had masks. People were apparently armed with knives and machetes. And she said, well, they only turned up to stop the far right. If that isn't picking sides, what is? If Keir Starmer was serious about dealing with this, he wouldn't have taken 7 days to call a Cobra meeting. He would have sacked Jess Phillips and said it is never acceptable for Home Office ministers to excuse violence and criminality on our streets. And I just think that's why people talk about this two-tier policing, because it does feel like there's one rule for one set of individuals and another rule for the others.
But you have to see everything in context. I do agree that Keir Starmer wasted too much time, but I can speak from my vantage point that does everyone expect that ethnic minorities should just sit and wait and hope that somebody comes to defend you? The images that we saw, the messages that's going in, like our family chat group about keeping everyone safe, how long do you wait until someone steps in? So when you get desperate enough, it's like when you hit dog or hollow, when you back someone into a corner, they then go into savage mentality, like do whatever I can to scare people away because it's fighting fire with fire. Jess Phillips recognizes that because she lives in a community that's very diverse. If you push people far enough, if you push any human being far enough, at some point they will defend themselves. So she's viewing it with that kind of context.
While the behaviour of these far-right, so-called thug mobs of white people destroying mosques and things like that is completely unacceptable and disgusting and not something we should accept in society. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. No militia, people wearing balaclavas, carrying weapons should be acceptable, whatever their background. And I expect our police, without fear or favour, without regard to people's race or religion, to arrest those people and throw the book at them. And what we've had is a message from a government minister in the Home Office responsible for policing, that isn't what she expects her police officers to do. It is a disgrace, and if Keir Starmer was serious about getting rid of this accusation of two-tier policing, two-tier care, he would have fired her, been down on her like a ton of bricks, like he should have come down on these rioters.
I do agree that there should be a unanimous approach to any violent kind of protest, whoever you are, wherever you're from. That is agreed. But when in the position she has, pragmatism is key, and she has to, like, what is the one thing everyone has been saying about the rioters? what is the motivation that led it to this? Why don't we understand the source of this? Why is it a desire for understanding on one part, but then you condemn her when she's trying to find understanding on the other part? The fact is, she knows that from being in a community that is that diverse, that when things like this have happened in the past, you know what has led to it. Had Keir Starmer acted sooner, it might never have gotten to a point where they felt, let's take our own defence into our own hands.
He's got form on this. 2020, BLM criminality all over the country, virtually no arrests made. I'm sorry, two-tier Keir is going to stick because it's what people see.
I didn't even get time to talk about social housing. So many of you are getting in touch as well. I do just want to make the point you're saying about defending your area and stuff. There is a difference between linking arms and defending a mosque. That's one thing. Taking to the streets, literally doing some kind of patrol, spot the white person so we can batter them, that, I would say, is something a little bit entirely different. You will have strong opinions on that at home. One of my viewers has said, Michelle, tomorrow, can you try and find some positive news? Yes, there you go. That's your homework for tonight. Find me some positive stories. I would be delighted. But for now, that's all. Thank you to my panel. Thank you to each and every one of you at home. Have a fantastic night, and I will see you tomorrow. Night-night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Cooler and clearer across northern areas tonight. Damp and cloudy further east, which will mean any viewing of the meteor shower will be a bit limited for more central and eastern areas. That's because this weather front that's been lingering across the west will finally push further eastwards overnight tonight, spreading cloud and rain into central areas of England at first this evening and then into the southeast probably by tomorrow morning. Further north and west, though, it's clearing up quite nicely and the winds will ease as well after a breezy day. So that will allow temperatures to fall away much lower than they have done lately. We could be down as low as 4 or 5 degrees rurally. Some towns and cities dipping into the single figures as well. But pretty murky start across central areas of England and the southeast first thing tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, though, for the far north of Scotland in particular. Eastern areas seeing a great start to the day, but as I said, it could be fairly fresh, but the sun will come up and warm things up quite quickly. Fairly good conditions across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, Western Wales as well, but it's northeast England, central areas and parts of the southeast are likely to see quite a grey start to the day. Risk of rain is more limited. I think some of us will see some patchy drizzle at least through the morning. That could last into the afternoon, particularly across the far southeast, but in general it will turn a little bit brighter as we head into the afternoon across central areas. And across the north, it's going to be a fairly fine day. Plenty of sunny spells and it should stay dry. Lighter winds mean it will feel fairly warm in the sunshine, highs of 22 or 23 degrees. But the next band of wet weather is arriving on Thursday morning, particularly across western areas of Scotland where it will persist, as well as Northern Ireland, northwestern England as well. And that will sink southwards through Thursday quite slowly, lingering across the south and east as we head into Friday. So a bit of a potentially wet day across southern areas on Friday, but looking ahead to the weekend, it looks fine, dry and warm.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems continue in Cumbria. A few miles north of Windermere, a serious accident continues to close the A591 on that short stretch from Tratbeck Bridge to Lowray. Investigation work is underway, leaving a couple of buses having to divert. Elsewhere, it's really slowed down the M6 through Warwickshire from junction 2 to 1, heading away from Coventry from the M69 towards the Rugby exit. The inside lane on that 3-lane stretch blocked off at the scene of a crash. Taking about 25 minutes to get through, I estimate, looking at the cameras. In Essex, east of Braintree, the A120 remains closed in Coggeshall and Bradwell following an accident. And in Gwynedd at North West Wales, of course, the A487 remains shut between Mighty Rock and Meanforth. Accident investigation works undergoing. And Transport for Wales can't run Telford Central to Shifnal after a train broke down. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.